The air was thick with heat and the smell of oil. The alien slave market was louder than the docking bays, filled with the sound of merchants shouting and cages clanging. Rows of prisoners sat behind bars, some standing tall, others staring at the ground. Jack moved through the crowd with steady steps, keeping his eyes sharp. He didn't like this place, but he had business on this planet, and the market was the quickest way to get information. The auction platform stood in the middle, a large, cracked slab of stone where each prisoner was brought up to be sold. Alien traders with jeweled robes shouted bids, waving credit chips in the air. Guards with shock batons kept the crowd back. Jack stopped near the edge of the crowd as the next prisoner was dragged up. She was different. Thin, her clothes little more than rags, her skin pale with a faint silver sheen. She walked slowly, her wrists chained, a limp in her left leg, but her eyes, sharp, steady, scanned the crowd without fear. The auctioneer, a fat insectoid with a gold mask, laughed into the microphone. "Here's one no one wants. Damaged goods. Dangerous temper. You'll get nothing but trouble with this one." The crowd chuckled. Some turned away. Others tossed insults in a dozen languages. Jack frowned. Something about the way she stood, even under the weight of the chains, didn't match the auctioneer's words. She wasn't broken. "No bids?" the auctioneer mocked. "Not even one credit? Come now, she might clean your floors. Or you can use her for—" "I'll take her," Jack said, his voice cutting through the noise. The market fell silent for a heartbeat. Heads turned. The auctioneer blinked behind his gold mask. "What did you say, human?" "I'll take her," Jack repeated, stepping forward. The crowd erupted in laughter and muttering. "Crazy human," someone hissed. "Buying trouble." The auctioneer tilted his head. "You want her? Fine. 200 credits. No returns." Jack tossed the payment chip onto the platform. "Done." A guard shoved the girl toward him, her chains clinking. She stumbled but didn't fall. Her eyes met Jack's for the first time. No gratitude, no fear, just a watchful calm. As they walked out of the market, Jack could feel eyes on his back. Whispers followed him through the hot, dusty street. The syndicate didn't like interference, and buying someone like her was interference. They turned into a narrow alley away from the main street. Jack stopped and faced her. "What's your name?" he asked. She stayed silent. He stepped closer, then crouched to meet her gaze. "I'm not here to hurt you." She studied him for a long moment, then finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "Lyra." Jack nodded. "I'm Jack." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small tool. Her eyes narrowed when she realized what he was doing. "Why?" "Because chains don't suit you," Jack said, unlocking her restraints. The metal fell away, leaving red marks on her wrists. She rubbed them slowly, still watching him. "You paid for me. That means you own me." Jack shook his head. "I don't own anyone." She didn't answer, but her expression shifted just slightly. Somewhere behind them, heavy boots echoed in the alley. Jack's eyes hardened. "We need to move. Now." Lyra hesitated, then followed. She didn't trust him, not yet, but she wasn't going back to the market. What neither of them knew was that from that moment, both their lives were already tangled in a fight neither could walk away from. The alleys beyond the slave market were narrow, twisting, and dark. Rusted pipes dripped onto cracked pavement, and the air was thick with the smell of damp metal. Jack led the way, glancing back every few steps to make sure Lyra was keeping up. She walked with a slight limp, her bare feet making almost no sound. Her wrists were still red from the chains, but she didn't complain. "You ever been off this planet?" Jack asked. She didn't answer. "You've got a name. You've got a story. I'd like to hear it." Lyra kept her eyes forward. "People who ask too many questions usually want something." Jack smirked faintly. "And what do you think I want?" She stopped walking, forcing him to do the same. "You paid for me. That means you bought me. And I've seen what that means." Jack met her gaze. "If I wanted a servant, I wouldn't have taken off your chains." Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She started walking again, and after a moment Jack followed. They reached a quieter part of the city, where the walls were covered in peeling paint and the streetlights flickered weakly. Jack guided her into a small storage room tucked behind an abandoned shop. He closed the door, locking it from the inside. "This'll do for now," he said. "No one should find us here." Lyra eyed the single cot against the wall and the box of supplies in the corner. "You hide a lot of people here?" Jack shook his head. "No, just you." Her eyes narrowed again. "Why?" Jack sat on the edge of the cot, leaning forward. "Because I saw you on that platform. You weren't broken. Everyone else looked like they'd given up. You didn't." Lyra turned away, but not before he caught the flicker of emotion in her expression. He reached into his coat and pulled out a ration pack, tossing it to her. She caught it easily, staring at it as if it might vanish. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked. She hesitated. "Before they took me to the market." "That could have been days." She shrugged. "Time doesn't matter much in a cage." Jack felt a tightness in his chest at her words. He leaned back, trying to keep his voice steady. "You said they. Who's they?" Lyra's gaze dropped to the floor. "Syndicate patrols. They raided my village. Took everyone they could carry. Sold the strong ones first. The rest waited." Jack had heard of syndicate raids before, fast, brutal, and without mercy. She looked up suddenly. "You shouldn't have taken me. They'll come after you now." Jack smiled faintly. "They were already watching me. This won't make much difference." Lyra studied him for a long moment, then sat on the cot opposite him. "You're not from here." "Nope," Jack said. "Born on a ship. Been moving ever since." She tilted her head. "Then why are you here?" Jack leaned back against the wall. "Looking for cargo. Found you instead." For the first time, her lips twitched like she might almost smile, but it was gone in an instant. A sudden noise outside made them both freeze, heavy boots on metal steps. Jack was on his feet in a heartbeat, his blaster drawn. He motioned for Lyra to stay low. She slipped off the cot and crouched behind a crate, her eyes wide but alert. The footsteps passed the door, then faded. Jack stayed still for another few seconds before lowering his weapon. "They're looking for us already," he said quietly. Lyra's voice was calm but firm. "Then we can't stay here." Jack nodded. "Agreed. My ship's at the port. We'll move after dark." She gave him a questioning look. "You're taking me with you?" He raised an eyebrow. "You think I'm leaving you here for them to find?" She didn't answer, but her eyes softened slightly. They waited in silence for the rest of the day. Jack kept his blaster close, listening to the faint hum of the city beyond the walls. Lyra didn't speak much, but he caught her watching him more than once. Not with suspicion now, but with quiet calculation, as if trying to decide whether he was worth trusting. When the city's lights dimmed and the streets grew quieter, Jack stood. "Time to go." Lyra rose, still limping but moving with purpose. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Jack had the distinct feeling that they were walking into a storm, and that neither of them would come out of it the same. The streets at night were quieter, but not safer. Jack kept one hand near his blaster as he and Lyra moved through the dim-lit alleys toward the spaceport. Steam hissed from vents in the walls, and distant shouts echoed between the buildings. Lyra walked beside him, her limp less noticeable now, though her eyes kept flicking to every shadow. "Is your ship far?" she asked quietly. "Docking Bay 12, Jack replied. "Small freighter. Nothing fancy, but it'll get us off-world." She hesitated before speaking again. "If the Syndicate controls this planet, won't they control the port?" "They do," Jack said, glancing at her. "Which is why we won't be leaving through the front gate." They approached the edge of the port district, where massive floodlights cast long beams over rows of cargo containers. Armed patrols walked in pairs, scanning the area. Jack led her down a narrow gap between two storage sheds, stopping at a locked service gate. He pulled a small device from his pocket, pressed it to the lock, and after a soft click, the gate swung open. Inside, the spaceport felt like another world, cleaner, brighter, filled with the scent of fuel and the hum of idling ships. Jack guided her through the shadows until they reached a squat, well-worn freighter with blue paint peeling from its hull. "This is it," he said, placing his hand on the side. "The Rust Wing." Lyra tilted her head. "Doesn't look fast." Jack smiled faintly. "That's the point. No one pays attention to ships like this." They climbed aboard, and Jack led her into the narrow living space. It was small but clean, 2 bunks, a compact galley, and a cockpit at the far end. "You can rest here," he said, motioning toward the lower bunk. "I've got a few things to take care of before we can leave." Lyra sat but didn't relax. "What things?" "Papers," Jack replied. "The syndicate scans every passenger list. Without forged clearance, they'll pull us in before we leave orbit." He opened a secure channel on his comm unit and keyed in a code. After a moment, a rough voice answered. "Jack, didn't expect to hear from you on this rock," the voice said. "Need forged departure papers for 2, Jack said. "Fast." There was a pause. "2? You picked up a passenger." Jack glanced at Lyra. "Something like that." The voice chuckled. "You know the syndicate's watching. They've put out a bounty for anyone interfering with their auctions. You're walking into a fire." "Just get me the papers," Jack said. "Fine. Meet me at the Drifter's dock in 1 hour. Bring cash." Jack cut the channel and turned to Lyra. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me. If anyone comes who's not me, you hide." Her eyes narrowed. "Why can't I come?" "Because this place is dangerous, and I need you alive," Jack said flatly. She didn't argue, but her gaze followed him as he left. The Drifter's dock was a dimly lit corner of the port where old smugglers, cargo runners, and deal-makers traded in whispers. Jack found his contact, a stocky man with a cybernetic eye, sitting at a small table. "You've got trouble, Jack," the man said, sliding a data chip across the table. "Rumor is the syndicate already knows you took someone from their auction. They've got patrols tightening the perimeter." Jack pocketed the chip. "Then I'll leave before they can close it." The smuggler leaned in. "I've known you a long time. You don't do this for strangers." "Who is she?" Jack stood. "Someone who doesn't deserve to be in chains." Back at the Rust Wing, Lyra was waiting by the door. She'd locked it, just like he told her, but her posture was tense. "You were followed," she said quietly. Jack's eyes sharpened. "How do you know?" "I saw shadows moving outside. They didn't knock or call out. Just watched." Jack stepped past her and peered out the small viewport. Nothing. But his gut told him she was right. He turned back to her. "We're leaving now." "But the papers." "I've got them," Jack said. "We'll use the maintenance lane to slip out. If they spot us, we'll deal with it." Lyra's expression hardened, and for the first time, Jack saw something different in her eyes. Not just caution, but determination. "They won't take me again," she said quietly. "No," Jack agreed, starting the engines. "They won't." The Rustwing's old thrusters hummed to life, and the ship lifted from the dock. Jack steered toward the maintenance lane, knowing the syndicate would soon realize he was trying to leave without their blessing. What he didn't know was that they were already waiting. The Rustwing's engines rumbled as Jack eased her toward the maintenance lane. The dim service corridor of spaceport traffic was less busy than the main launch path, lined with flickering guidance lights and patrolled only by automated drones. "Keep an eye on the scanners," Jack said, his voice steady but clipped. Lyra leaned forward in the co-pilot's seat, eyes on the small green blips moving across the display. 2 drones ahead, nothing behind. Jack nodded. "Good. If we slip past them without alerting the main gate, we might." The proximity alarm blared, cutting him off. 3 new blips appeared on the screen, fast, moving in from behind. "They're not drones," Lyra said, her voice tightening. Jack's eyes narrowed. "Syndicate interceptors." A voice crackled over the comm, sharp and cold. "Unregistered vessel Rustwing. Power down and prepare to be boarded. You have property that belongs to the syndicate." Lyra's hands clenched on the edge of the console. "They mean me." Jack didn't waste time answering. "Hang on." He pushed the throttle forward, and the Rustwing's old frame shuddered as she accelerated. The interceptors gave chase, their engines burning bright in the viewport's reflection. Blaster fire lit up the darkness, streaking past the freighter's hull. Jack jerked the controls, weaving between the narrow walls of the maintenance lane. Shields at 60%. Lyra shouted, reading the display. Jack's jaw tightened. We can't outrun them, not in this bucket. We'll have to make them back off. He flicked a switch, arming the ship's ventral turret. You ever fired a turret before? Lyra blinked at him. No. Then today's your first lesson. Go. She didn't argue. She unstrapped, sprinting toward the ladder that led down to the turret control. Jack kept the rust wing swerving, dodging incoming fire as best he could. A moment later, Lyra's voice came through the comm. I'm in position. Target their engines, not the cockpit, Jack instructed. We're not trying to kill them, just make them think twice. There was a pause, then the low thump of the turret firing. One interceptor veered sharply to avoid the blast. The second took a hit to its wing, spinning off before stabilizing. Nice shot, Jack said. Lyra's reply was calm. One left. The last interceptor pressed closer, blasting at the Rustwing's tail. A glancing hit rattled the freighter, and warning lights flashed on the console. Jack gritted his teeth. Lyra now. Her shot struck true, the interceptor's engine flaring before the ship peeled away, smoke trailing from its rear. The proximity alarm quieted, leaving only the hum of the Rustwing's engines and the crackle of damaged systems. Get back up here, Jack said, already adjusting their course. When Lyra returned to the cockpit, her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes burned with something more than adrenaline. You weren't lying, she said. You really didn't buy me to own me. Jack smirked faintly, keeping his eyes on the navigation screen. Took you long enough to figure that out. She shook her head. Where are we going now? Out of atmosphere, Jack said. Once we're clear, I can make the jump to hyperspace. But as the Rustwing climbed higher, the scanner pinged again. This time, it wasn't a small escort. It was a large, heavily armed ship moving to block their path. Lyra stared at the screen. That's not an interceptor. Jack's stomach sank. No, that's a Syndicate blockade runner. The comm crackled again, the voice colder than before. Rustwing, your luck is finished. Power down or be destroyed. Jack cut the channel. Strap in. Lyra frowned. You can't fight that thing head-on. I'm not going to, Jack said, flipping switches in quick succession. I'm going to go around it. She looked out the viewport at the massive ship blocking their way. Around it? How? Before she could finish, Jack dove the Rustwing hard to port, skimming dangerously close to the planet's upper atmosphere. The hull groaned, heat alarms blared, and turbulence shook them in their seats. The blockade runner fired, but the shots went wide in the turbulence. Jack used the storm front of the planet's upper clouds to mask their escape, pushing the Rustwing until the stars finally opened up ahead of them. The blockade was behind them. The jump point was just ahead. Lyra exhaled slowly. We made it. Jack's voice was steady, but there was a glint in his eyes. This round, yes, but they'll keep coming until we make it clear we're not worth chasing. And how do we do that? She asked. Jack's smirk returned. By hitting them before they hit us. The Rustwing drifted in the quiet black of space, her engines idling low after the narrow escape. Jack checked the scanners twice before switching them to passive mode. For now, the stars around them were clear. Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, her gaze fixed on the endless dark beyond the viewport. Where now? She asked. Jack leaned back. I've got a contact. Old friend. If anyone can help us disappear from the Syndicate's watch lists, it's him. She eyed him cautiously. You trust him? Jack's mouth twisted in a small, humorless smile. I've known him a long time, but trust? That's a different story. A few hours later, the Rustwing docked at a lonely refueling station orbiting a dead moon. The place was half abandoned, its docking clamps creaking and lights flickering. A single figure waited at the end of the bay, broad-shouldered, wearing a patched flight jacket, a grin already on his face. Jack Harper, The man greeted, his voice warm. You still breathing? Thought you'd be space dust by now. Good to see you too, Ren, Jack replied, shaking his hand firmly. Ren's eyes flicked to Lyra. And who's this? Jack hesitated just a second too long. She's under my protection. Ren chuckled. That a new line of work for you? Rescuing trouble? Jack ignored the jab. We need forged IDs, clearance papers, and a clean transponder. Fast. Ren whistled low. That's not a small order, Jack. But for an old friend, I can make it happen. They followed him through the dim corridors of the station to a cluttered workroom. Ren began pulling out datapads, slicing tools, and blank ID chips. His hands moved quickly, his tone casual. So, he said, glancing up, you tick off the syndicate this time, or just trip into their territory without paying the toll? Something like that, Jack said. I took someone they didn't want me to have. Ren's smile faded a little, though he kept working. You're lucky I've still got friends in the right corners. Give me an hour. Jack nodded, but Lyra's eyes narrowed. She had been watching Ren closely, and she didn't miss the way his gaze lingered on her just a little too long. They left him to his work, retreating to the rust wing to wait. Jack poured 2 cups of recycled coffee, handing one to Lyra. You don't like him, Jack noted. Lyra shook her head. He asked too much with his eyes. Jack's brow furrowed. He's always been nosy. It wasn't curiosity, she said quietly. It was calculation. Before Jack could respond, the comms panel beeped. He stepped over and tapped it open. Static crackled, then Ren's voice came through. Jack, got the papers ready. Come on back. Jack killed the channel and looked at Lyra. An hour exactly. That's too fast, she said. Too easy. Her words stuck in his mind as they walked back to the workroom. Ren greeted them with the same grin, sliding 2 freshly printed ID cards across the table. Clean as they come, he said. Your ship's transponder is already updated. You can leave right now, and the syndicate scanners will think you're long gone. Jack picked up the cards, studying them. The work looked flawless, almost too flawless. What's the catch? Ren spread his hands. Catch? Old friends don't need catches. Lyra's eyes darted toward the far corner of the room. The door there was half closed, but through the gap, she saw the gleam of a weapon barrel and the faint shadow of someone waiting. She moved fast. Jack! Before Ren could react, she grabbed his arm and yanked him back just as the door burst open and 2 syndicate enforcers stepped in, weapons raised. Should have known, Jack growled, shoving the table into Ren and drawing his blaster in one motion. The room exploded into chaos. Lyra dove for cover behind a storage crate, peering out long enough to spot another figure at the back. A comms operator speaking rapidly into a headset. They're calling for backup, she shouted. Jack fired, forcing the enforcers to scatter. One shot hit the comms console, cutting the transmission. Ren swore, holding up his hands. It's just business, Jack. The syndicate pays better than you ever could. Jack's voice was cold. Then take their pay in the afterlife. Before he could fire, one of the enforcers rushed him. The 2 slammed into the wall, grappling for the blaster. Lyra snatched up a dropped pistol and fired, hitting the enforcer in the shoulder. Jack shoved him away, then swung his weapon toward Ren. But the man had already bolted through the side door. Forget him, Lyra shouted. We have to go. They ran, syndicate shouts echoing down the corridors behind them. By the time they reached the rust wing, more figures were spilling into the docking bay. Jack hit the controls, yanking the ship free of the clamps before they had fully released. The old freighter groaned, then roared as they powered away from the station, blaster fire sparking off the hull. Lyra strapped in, her voice steady despite the chaos. You were right. Trust is a different story. Jack's jaw was tight as he angled the ship toward open space. And now, we make sure they regret trying to sell us out. The Rustwing's engines growled at full power, but the Syndicate's ships were still closing in on the scanner. Jack knew they couldn't keep running. The Rustwing wasn't built for endless chases. They're faster, Lyra said, reading the screen from the co-pilot's seat. We can't outrun them. Jack's hands stayed steady on the controls. Then we don't run. She gave him a sharp look. What are you planning? Jack's gaze flicked to the navigation panel, where a blinking marker indicated a debris field, the shattered remains of an old battle, full of broken warships and unexploded munitions. A graveyard, Lyra muttered. A perfect hiding place, Jack said. And maybe more than that. The Rustwing dove toward the debris field. The scanners filled with cluttered readings as wreckage blocked clean sensor locks. Massive chunks of destroyed cruisers floated in the dark, their hulls twisted and torn. Jack maneuvered between them, weaving through narrow gaps. We can use the wrecks as cover. Get them close enough to one of those old torpedo racks, and… Lyra's eyes widened. You're going to blow them up. Jack grinned faintly. Exactly. The Syndicate ships followed, their pilots skilled enough to keep pace even in the tight spaces. Jack spotted what he was looking for, a gutted destroyer with a still intact weapons bay. Hang on, he said, swinging the Rustwing hard to port and sliding behind the destroyer's broken hull. He killed the main engines, letting them drift silently into position. The Syndicate ships swept past, not realizing they had overshot. Jack's fingers flew over the controls, switching to manual targeting for the Rustwing's forward guns. The old torpedo rack on the destroyer's side was still loaded, though the warheads were decades old. Jack only needed to rupture them. Ready? He asked. Lyra's voice was steady. Do it. Jack fired. The first shot sparked against the metal, the second punched deep, and the third set off a chain reaction. The explosion lit up the black, a blinding flash followed by a rolling wave of debris and fire. The nearest Syndicate ship was shredded instantly, the second crippled, and the third veered off hard, its hull scorched. Alarms screamed in the Rustwing as fragments of wreckage slammed against the shields. Jack threw the ship into a spin, dodging the worst of it. When the light faded, only one Syndicate ship remained functional, and it was retreating. Lyra stared at the empty scanner grid. They're running. For now, Jack said. They'll send more if we stick around. She leaned back, still catching her breath. You could have been killed doing that. Jack gave her a faint smile. I've done dumber things. Silence filled the cockpit for a moment. Lyra's gaze shifted toward him. You didn't have to save me back there. You could have left me at the market or at that station, or even when the Syndicate chased us. Jack looked at her, his expression softening. A long time ago, I saw someone in chains and walked away. I told myself it wasn't my fight. I've regretted it every day since. I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. Her eyes lingered on his for a moment, and something in her posture eased. Not fully trust, but closer. Where do we go now? She asked. Jack glanced at the star map. Somewhere the Syndicate doesn't bother going. I know a colony a few jumps from here, quiet, independent. You can start fresh there if you want. Lyra's voice was calm, but firm. And if I don't want to stay? Jack smirked. Then you stay on the Rustwing and we see where the next job takes us. Lyra leaned back, a faint smile on her lips. We'll see. Jack fired the hyperdrive, and the stars stretched into lines as the Rustwing jumped to safety. For now, the Syndicate's shadow was behind them. But Jack knew they'd be watching for him, and he didn't care, because for the first time in years, he was doing something that mattered. The Rustwing emerged from hyperspace into the quiet orbit of a pale green world. No Syndicate patrols. No scanners sweeping for fugitives. Just a scattering of small stations and cargo haulers going about their business. That's it, Lyra asked, leaning forward in the co-pilot's seat. Doesn't look like much. Jack smiled faintly. That's why it's perfect. No one comes here unless they need to trade food or fuel. No slavers. No Syndicate. They descended through soft clouds to a settlement nestled in a wide valley. Domes and low buildings dotted the grassy plains, with narrow roads winding toward a small starport. The people below moved at an easy pace, the kind that comes from not looking over their shoulders every minute. Jack brought the Rustwing down on a worn landing pad. The ramp lowered with a hiss, letting in fresh air tinged with the scent of wildflowers. Lyra hesitated at the edge of the ramp, her gaze sweeping over the open space as if she didn't trust it was real. "Last time I stood outside without a cage wall," she began, then trailed off. Jack glanced at her. "It's yours now. No chains. No one hunting you here." She stepped onto the grass slowly, as though it might vanish if she moved too fast. The sunlight caught in her silver-tinged skin, making it gleam. Locals paused to glance at them, curious but not unfriendly. An older man waved as he passed by, pulling a small cargo sled. Lyra flinched out of habit, but when the man kept walking without another word, her shoulders eased. "This feels strange," she said quietly. "Freedom usually does it first," Jack replied. They walked toward the settlement's main square, where small market stalls sold fresh produce and handmade goods. Jack stopped by a supply vendor, exchanging a few credits for food packs and repair materials for the Rustwing. Lyra lingered nearby, watching a group of children chasing each other between the stalls. One of the kids, a girl with bright green skin, waved at her. Lyra's lips curved into a faint, cautious smile. When they returned to the ship, she stood at the foot of the ramp, looking back toward the valley. "I could stay here," she said. "Live like they do. Forget about the syndicate." Jack nodded. "You could." She turned to face him. But you don't strike me as someone who stays in one place," Jack said. "You've got fight in you. That doesn't go away just because the chains are gone." Lyra's gaze drifted past him to the Rustwing. "If I came with you, they'd still be after us." "They'll be after me no matter what," Jack said. "The only question is whether you want to keep moving or not." She studied him for a long moment. "Why me, Jack? Why risk all of this?" He leaned against the ramp's edge, the sunlight catching in his eyes. "Because once, a long time ago, I walked away from someone who needed help. I swore I'd never do it again. And because the moment I saw you on that platform, I knew you didn't belong there. You deserved a choice." Her expression softened. The guarded defiance she'd carried since they met was still there, but now tempered by something warmer. "I don't know if I trust you completely yet," she admitted. Jack gave a small, lopsided grin. "Good. Trust should be earned." There was a long pause. Then Lyra took a slow breath. "Then let's keep moving. See where the stars take us." Jack's smile widened, but he didn't say anything more. He simply walked up the ramp, and she followed. The Rustwing's engines rumbled back to life, kicking up a swirl of dust as they lifted from the pad. The valley shrank below them, the domes and markets fading into the horizon. As the ship broke through the upper atmosphere, Lyra strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat. "Where to first?" Jack flipped a switch and the star map lit up. "Anywhere that's not on the syndicate's payroll." The stars stretched into long white lines as the hyperdrive engaged. Lyra leaned back, the faintest smile on her lips. She was free now, not because someone gave her freedom, but because she chose it. And for Jack, that was worth every risk, every fight, and every enemy they just made.